Chapter 5. Fish What I Want. The leader's body was placed on the open space in front of the cave and temporarily covered with grass. In Luo Cheng's memory, the dead in this tribe were generally cremated. Maybe they had buried bodies before, but if they were buried shallowly, they would still be dug out and eaten by wild beasts. It would be better to burn them cleanly. However, the funeral will have to wait until the evening when all the tribesmen return to burn together. The two adults have already gone out to collect firewood. No one paid any attention to them for the time being. The friends were still surrounding the moa to observe it. Several women were still studying how to disassemble the moa, as they had never dealt with such a large prey before. Luo Cheng also thought about it and realized that it was impossible to pluck its feathers with hot water like a chicken, and there was no pot big enough to boil water, so he might as well peel the skin directly. Luo Cheng told them to leave the feathers for him and let them do the rest themselves. The feathers are not needed to make a feather crown. Maybe they can be used to make bows and arrows in the future. Anyway, just save them for now. We are so poor now that we must learn how to live and collect some materials to make our own equipment in the future. Now that the danger was over, everyone was working and watching, and Luo Cheng continued to weave his baskets. For some reason, Luo Cheng always felt that time passed very slowly here. He had experienced so many things today, but the sun had just risen to the middle of the sky. He always felt that a day here was longer than the previous day. This was an intuition. You know, when he was in the army, he completed his tasks on the hour, which directly led to his biological clock being more sensitive. Damn it, maybe this isn't Earth. The rotation time is different from Earth's. God knows where this place is. Not wanting to think about these things anymore, Luo Cheng started to weave the basket seriously. Storing food was the most important thing right now, as he didn't want to live a life where he had to eat only once every 2 days. About another hour later, Luo Cheng had woven 2 baskets and twisted some straw ropes, which were made from the grass pulled by his friends. The vines were not used up yet, and he could probably weave 3 more. Mainly, these baskets woven by Luo Cheng were used for fishing, so the gaps were relatively large and less materials were used. Luo Cheng filled a basket with the innards of the terror birds and went to the river. They were all inedible things, so except for the heart and liver, the rest had to be thrown away. The stomach could not be eaten either, as it probably contained the leader's meat. The intestines could also be kept, washed, and dried to be used as ropes. The rest were all taken away by Luo Cheng, as he planned to use these innards as bait later. The stream was just to the north of the cave, less than a kilometer away. A woman saw Luo Cheng trying to go to the river alone and tried to stop him from going. However, Luo Cheng was very persistent, and the woman had no choice but to follow him. But she also held a stone basin, which was the only container for holding water in the entire tribe. It was unknown how many years it took to make it. Since she was going to the river, she might as well get a basin of water. If the cave was sealed at night, she could only drink water from the basin. In her heart, she thought that Luo Cheng was a very capable child, and she must keep an eye on him and not let him fall into the river. The 2 boys who had just recognized Luo Cheng as their leader saw him making another strange thing and were about to get out, so they immediately followed him. The group of 4 arrived at the river. The woman filled a basin of water and waited by the side. She didn't know what Luo Cheng was going to do. Luo Cheng stood alone on the shore and observed for a while. He couldn't help but gasp, which instantly reminded him of his junior high school textbooks. Fish is what I want, and I am also what the fish wants. You cannot have both, so you have to give up me and take the fish. Ahem, this is of course not the original text. The reason I said this is because he discovered that there were carnivorous fish in this river. He stood on the shore for 5 minutes, and within his sight, 3 cases of big fish eating small fish occurred. If they fell into the river, it would be hard to say who would eat whom. However, although this place is extremely poor, we have to admit that the ecological environment here is really good. The water in the stream is very clear, and you can see the bottom of the water at a glance. The shallow part of the river is probably only about 1 meter deep. There are also many fish in it. Although they are not densely packed, if you look at any place, you can see a few fish within your field of vision. This density can be said to be very high, at least more than the fish in the Amazon River. After choosing a location, they first took out the moa's internal organs and smashed them, then put the basket into the river. 3 straw ropes were tied to the top edge of the basket, and then they were joined together in the middle to make it easier to pull it up. Seeing that Luo Cheng had no intention of going into the river, the woman ignored him and stood quietly by the side watching him fiddling with the basket. Her mind was full of questions. Are you going to wash the basket, boy? It's useless to say anything now. We must first catch the fish and tell them that this is edible. Only then will they take it seriously and reduce their fear of the river water. The basket woven by Luo Cheng is about 50 centimeters high, which is just the distance from the middle finger to the elbow when you stretch out your palm. He chose a gentle slope near the river. The river is about 1 meter deep, and the basket sinks to the bottom and is slightly tilted, so that the mouth of the basket can be lower, making it easier for fish to get in. Grab a handful of smashed viscera as bait and throw it into the basket. The meaty smell quickly spreads in the water, and the fish within a radius of 20 meters become agitated and swim towards the center of the smell. The first 5 fish that swam over were about 40 centimeters long. They jumped into the basket and began to scramble for the internal organs and debris, muddying the water in the basket. Luo Cheng was quick-witted and pulled the straw rope in an instant, dragging the basket out of the water. In the chaos, 1 fish escaped, and only 4 were caught. But this was still impressive, as 4 fish were caught from 1 basket. Not only did the fish in the river not escape, but they also swarmed below to scramble for the bait. He instantly felt like he was feeding koi in the park, throwing a handful of fish food and a group of fish below rushing to grab it. Fuck, don't these fish have brains? They can't even see such a simple trap, ha ha ha. Luo Cheng laughed so hard that his eyes could hardly open. This scene immediately gave him a sense of pleasure of crushing IQ across the ages. He was probably the first person in the world to catch fish. Fish had never seen such fun. The 2 little friends and the adult woman were all very surprised. They could put that strange thing in the water and pull it up to get the legless thing out of the water, but they still didn't understand what to do with it. Luo Cheng dumped the 4 fish on the ground. The fish that were on the shore were still jumping on the ground. The woman and 2 children came over to touch them. When the fish jumped up, they were so scared that they quickly retracted their hands. How can you be afraid of fish? You will have to eat it in the future. Luo Cheng took a stone from the shore and knocked the fish unconscious, then smashed a pebble, found a sharp stone chip as a knife, scraped the scales, picked the gills, cut open the belly and took out the internal organs. His movements were extremely skillful. Although this was his first time to kill a fish, he had done this job many times in his previous life. He would pick the fish's gills and clean them in the river, then put them on a large rock, cut a piece of sashimi with a stone knife, and put it in his mouth. Looking at the bright red blood flowing out of the fish's belly and Luo Cheng chewing on the sashimi, even a fool could see that fish is edible. The woman and 2 children were watching eagerly beside them. Luo Cheng didn't mean to tempt them. In fact, eating sashimi like this without any condiments would not taste good at all. He did this just to tell them that fish is edible. Luo Cheng cut a piece of fish for each of them. They all tasted it and were very happy. Because they had never tasted the seasoning, they didn't think much about it. In their opinion, as long as it was edible, it was fine. They were not picky eaters and would even eat tree roots when they were extremely hungry. What's more, this was meat. Chapter 6. Integrating into the primitive. Understanding the importance of fish and looking at the countless fish in the river competing for bait, the 2 children may not know what this means, but the woman's eyes lit up instantly. This is a new source of food, and there is a lot of food. It is not as dangerous as hunting in the jungle. Perhaps it will become the staple food source of the tribe in the future. The woman babbled and gestured, asking Luo Cheng to teach her how to catch fish. However, Luo Cheng did not let her do that. He rearranged the tasks for the 3 people. 1 child was responsible for smashing the internal organs. The woman was responsible for slaughtering the fish, and the other child went to the small trees by the river to collect branches and sticks, and then used grass to thread the fish's gills and hang it up. The 3 of them had a clear division of labor. Luo Cheng continued to fish, and this time he really caught some. He threw a handful of bait down, and the fish gathered together. The basket was pushed down by the fish and couldn't go down. Luo Chong simply squatted on the shore and scooped with the basket. He would always catch some fish, and the least was never less than 2. The 4 of them worked like this for the whole afternoon. When they felt there were too few fish, they moved to another place. In the end, they caught too many fish, so Luo Chong decided to call it a day. He and the child who smashed the bait helped the woman kill the fish. In the end, they counted more than 200 fish. The largest one was estimated to be about 10 kilograms, and the smallest was the size of a palm. The 3 of them were unable to take any of them back. Luo Chong sent a child to call the older children to help. The woman held the basin of water, and the 2 children lifted a wooden stick full of fish. Luo Chong himself also took a wooden stick and carried 2 baskets full of fish like a shoulder pole. The group returned to the cave in a mighty manner, facing the setting sun. The teams that went out to collect fruits and hunt have all returned. They cannot stay in the jungle at night. It is very dangerous, and they must return to the cave before the sun sets. Now they are still looking at the skeleton of the terror bird and the body of the leader, listening to the women who stayed behind telling them what happened today. At this time, the children came back carrying fish, shouting and showing off to the adults that they also had a lot of catch today, not less than the adults, because they had no tools. The prey that the adults caught were mostly small animals such as rabbits, groundhogs, snakes, bird eggs, and pheasants, and there were not many of them. Originally, the adults were a little sad about the death of their leader, not because they loved him so much, but because the tribe had lost an adult laborer who could hunt. However, when they saw Luo Chong's harvest today, they instantly became happy again, and the tragedy of their leader was immediately forgotten. After cleaning up today's harvest, all the tribesmen went outside the cave. A large pile of firewood was piled on the open space in front of the cave entrance. The leader's body was placed on it. An old man with 2 goat horns on his head lit the pile of firewood, and the blazing fire soon engulfed the leader's body. The firelight shone on everyone's face. The children were drooling at the smell of roasted meat. They did not feel sad at all. The adults also looked calm because they had a new source of food. Luo Chong also took the opportunity to take a good look at the tribe. The tribe currently has a total population of 52, excluding the leader who is lying on the fire. There are 8 adult men, 15 adult women, 14 children over the age of 6, including 6 boys and 8 girls, and a total of 15 children under the age of 6. There were very few adult men, and in Luo Chong's opinion, they were all ugly. The one who had just started the fire was the elder of the tribe, because he was the oldest and recognized as the smartest man in the tribe. However, now he might have to rank second because Luo Chong was replacing his position in everyone's hearts. The elder has goat horns on his head and a goatee, with very distinctive features. His status in the tribe is almost equal to that of the chief. There is also a man with 6 fingers on his hands. His favorite weapon is a wooden stick. He is a bit stupid, which can be seen from his dull eyes. He is probably the product of inbreeding. Next to Liu Ji was a guy with a feather necklace around his neck. Luo Chong named him Feather. Feather was a very smart guy and, like Liu Ji, he liked to use a wooden stick. Behind the feathers is Stone wearing a bone necklace. He has no weapons in his hands. Because the thing he uses most often is stone, his name is Stone. A little far from them was a 15-year-old boy, but he was considered an adult here. This guy impressed Luo Chong the most because he only had 1 right ear and 4 scars on his left face. It was said that they were left when he was hunting a bobcat alone. The bobcat tore off his left ear with 1 claw and scratched his face, but he also killed the bobcat. The weapon used by Du Er was a pipe fork, which was made of a straight thigh bone. It was hollow in the middle, and the bevel at the front was very sharp. Next to one ear is the 17-year-old animal tooth. The animal tooth necklace around his neck is said to have been passed down to him by his father, who was the leader of the previous generation. The weapons in his hands are 2 saber-toothed tiger fangs that are more than a foot long. There was also a man named Dali who was the tallest in the tribe. Dali was nearly 1.9 meters tall, which was considered very abnormal among primitive people. He was strong and powerful, and his weapon was simple and crude, just a thigh bone. No one knew what animal it came from, but the bone was quite long. The last one is a lame man leaning on a wooden stick. The lame man is a middle-aged man with a disabled right leg, which was crippled when he was hunting when he was young. He has no problem walking, but he can't run. Now he follows the gathering team to find fruits every day. He is responsible for clearing the way and being on guard. He also likes to polish stone tools. Although he is disabled, he is strong-willed. The lame man's biggest dream is to grind out a stone basin in his lifetime. Doer, Shuya, and Dali, these three should be considered the top fighting forces in the tribe, of course, excluding Luo Chong. The leader's body turned to ashes in the fire. These things can be cleaned up tomorrow. A fire at the entrance of the cave can also prevent wild animals from approaching. After burning the leader, the sky became completely dark, and Luo Chong's face also became completely dark. It was not because of anything else, but because he saw two moons in the sky, one big and one small. The big one moved from east to west, and the small one moved from north to south. This is fucking crazy. It's okay to travel through time, but the result is still not Earth. I don't know if the things I learned before are still useful here. Everyone returned to the cave to prepare dinner. The entrance of the cave had been blocked with huge rocks. Today's staple food was fruit and fish. Fruit was not easy to store, so they were eaten first. What was left were nuts. Luo Chong saw chestnuts among the harvest of the collection team. The recognition rate of this thing was quite high. In the past, the leader always distributed food, but today an exception was made and Luo Chong was allowed to distribute it. The main reason was that no one had ever eaten fish, so they didn't know how to eat it. Luo Chong inserted a wooden stick into the fish's mouth and gave one to each adult, asking them to roast it themselves. He also repeatedly warned them that there were fish bones in the fish. He also took a pre-roasted fish and demonstrated to them how to eat it and how to pick out the bones. Everyone followed his example and ate vigorously. For the children, a dozen people would share one big fish. The bigger the fish, the bigger the bones. Big bones are easier to pick out and not likely to get stuck. For 29 children, 2 roasted fish weighing more than 10 pounds were enough. Each person would have a piece of fruit, and they all enjoyed the meal very much. Luo Chong picked out the bones from the grilled fish and distributed pieces to the 3- or 4-year-old children. The children were very well behaved while eating. They held fruits in their hands, licked the corners of their mouths with their little tongues, and looked at the grilled fish with bright eyes, waiting for Luo Chong to give them the meat. At the deepest part of the cave, there is a natural rock crack that points upward. That place can be ventilated, and the smoke in the cave will drift away from there. I have to say that this place is well chosen. It is hidden, safe, and ventilated. In this era where wild beasts are rampant and dangers are lurking everywhere, it is truly a rare safe haven. The fire in the middle of the cave shone on everyone, leaving many human figures swaying on the rock wall. Simple murals told the rise and fall and history of this tribe. The elder with goat horns on his head held a burnt charcoal stick and painted a mural on the rock wall of Luo Chong fishing by the river. The children licked their hands unsatisfied after eating the fish. The autumn wind outside the cave drifted around with faintly discernible roars of animals. In the warm cave, the women hummed soft tunes to coax their children to sleep. The lame man was still struggling with his stone basin. Several little girls were picking fish bones, not knowing how to make them into jewelry to dress themselves up. One-eared man was sharpening his fork, and Luo Chong continued to weave his rattan basket. The warm scene suddenly made Luo Chong feel at home, and his strong adaptability made him integrate into this group unconsciously.